Pericles intends that anyone entering the building will be intimidated. This is not just a place of worship. It houses the state treasury and also the ultimate symbol of the city, an enormous statue of the patron goddess, Athena. Engineer Ed McCann has been trying to find the place where the statue, long since destroyed, once stood.
Manolis is a bit embarrassed to tell me where the statue was because it's right underneath that rather horrible crane. It was where Athena used to stand in all her glory. Will you put Athena back as part of the restoration?
It's impossible because the whole thing was destroyed, completely destroyed during the fire in the 3rd century AD.
Records suggest that the statue was 30 feet tall. It was clad in gold and ivory, and because it was inside the building, it could only be seen from close quarters. Any onlooker would feel dwarfed.
This statue was virtually unprecedented. Pericles had it put on a plinth that was 5 foot tall, so that when you went in, all you could see was her feet, and then you gradually lifted your gaze up and up and up and up, 40 more feet, until you finally came to her beautiful face, her helmet with these horses springing out of it towards the gods. The statue of Athena in Athens completely altered the history of temple statuary in the ancient world, and therefore probably of Christian statuary as well.
And the design of the temple's exterior has proved still more influential. Throughout the 2,500 years since it was built, engineers all over the world tried to copy the Parthenon, but they never bettered it. Ed McCann unlocks its secrets.
One of the more famous stories about the Parthenon is how, although it's a very rectangular building when you look at it, actually there aren't any straight lines in it at all, and that the people who built it all with gentle curves going upwards to counterbalance an optical effect. But when you look at straight lines from distance, they don't appear to be straight, and so everything's curved. And to show that, what we've done here is we've taken one of the main steps here on the Parthenon, we've put a string going from corner to corner, and here I am in the middle of the Parthenon, and we can see that there's maybe 4 or 5 inches here of sag relative to the top of the step. What that means is that the step is 4 inches higher here than it is on the corners, and this happens all over the Parthenon.
It is now possible to bring together decades of research and, using the latest graphic modeling techniques, rebuild the Parthenon. Eight columns at the front, 8 at the back, a row of 15 on either side. Traveling through the temple, you'd pass through a porch, into the 100-foot-long sanctuary of Athena, into the treasury at the back, and out through another porch made with 6 columns.
The Romans regarded the miracles of the Acropolis as the models for many of their buildings, and of course they then affected enormously the sort of buildings that went up during the European Renaissance. So even if it's via Rome, the Parthenon's influence always lives on in architecture.
This one building alone would have been enough to guarantee Pericles' place in history. But he will do more. He is bringing a radical, fundamental change to Athens. A new set of buildings will transform the whole city and its people. Pericles will build democracy. High on the Acropolis, throughout Pericles' time in government, the Parthenon stands as testament to Athens' status. It is a superpower.
Athens showed her dominance over the rest of the Greek world mainly through, I think, Pericles' building program.
But his plans aren't just about showing off to the wider world. Pericles intends to reshape the lives of ordinary Athenians. The focus of his building work shifts from the religious sanctuaries to the city below. Like modern-day Athens, it is a busy center of trade. At its heart is the agora.
The agora was extremely important. It's a marketplace, it's a political center, it's a social center. It's basically the middle of town in all respects.
Today, the agora lies in ruins. It has in the past been attacked by barbarian invaders and built on by private homeowners. It is abandoned. But it is possible to recreate what it looked like in Pericles' time, when these 30 acres were the center of the most advanced civilization on Earth. John Camp is a world authority on the building of the agora. He spent more than 3 decades trying to piece together what it looked like. Within this one plot were busy streets, a collection of temples, a marketplace, and the first ever Senate house.
The agora in Periclean times would have been quite impressive. It would have been lined with stoas, which are big, long, colonnaded buildings in which you could take shelter from the sun or from the rain, depending on the weather. And it will have been full of people.
Yet another stunning temple was built here, very different from the Parthenon. Called the Hephaestion, it was dedicated to the craftsmen who made Pericles' vision a reality. By making this gesture, Pericles was acknowledging the root of his power. It lay in the backing he received from his people.
It's one of the best preserved temples in antiquity, so it's a little hard to see how it goes together. When you come down here, you can see pieces of its virtual twin, which was set up down in the lower square. And from this, you can see that the building is made pretty much all of marble. No mortar was used. The individual pieces were held together with iron clamps, such as the one you see here, and iron dowels. And you can still see the piece of iron and a little bit of the lead used to hold it in place, along with the pry hole used to get the next big block in place. This here is a step block, and everything above here in that direction would have been the second step, so all these marks would have been covered.
The Hephaestion stood on the edge of the agora, but at its center stood the council chamber. To build it, workers leveled ground, created artificial terraces, and built into the rock. The building techniques used were tried and tested, but what happened inside the building was revolutionary. This building was the birthplace of democracy.
These walls here are all that remain of the old council chamber, built in about 500 BC. It was a very simple building with mud brick walls, a columnar facade to the south, and a bunch of wooden seats for the councilors to sit on.
A rectangular antechamber led to a large main hall. At its center, a timber roof was supported by 5 columns.
500 Athenians would be allotted every year, not elected, just picked out of a hat, to serve as the senators.
The form of democracy they used was very simple. The council would present the people with issues for discussion, litigation, taxation, or whether to go to war. Then the actual decisions were made by the people. They cast their votes by dropping a pebble into a terracotta pot. The council chamber can be compared to the U.S. Senate, but instead of allowing career politicians to dominate, it was expected that at some point in his life, every Athenian citizen would serve.
Most democracies today are representative democracies. Athens was a direct democracy. We can compare it as a working system of government to something like a New England town meeting, where everybody in the town goes to the meeting and the decisions are made by everyone.
Pericles' Athenians also developed a way of preventing any one individual from gaining too much power.
Ostracism is something we don't use anymore. It was kind of a reverse election where the Athenians had the opportunity once a year to vote somebody out of office. And the way they did it was by writing the name of the man they thought was a threat to the democracy on a piece of pottery. And the Greek word for that is an ostrakon. So it was essentially being exiled for 10 years by vote of little bits of pottery.
One day, a politician might be enormously popular with the people. The next, his assets could be frozen, and he might be banished from the country for 10 years. It's striking to note that is a punishment that Pericles never faced, despite dominating politics in Athens for more than 3 decades. His power came from the support of the people. And the humble homes of private individuals lay nearby, right alongside the mighty buildings and temples of the state.
We're in the remains of a fairly typical Athenian house. This wall here going back in that direction there, that area is the open courtyard. They're very simple, they're very modest.
The walls of these houses were made out of mud brick or field stones reinforced with wood lined with clay. Once finished, the walls were painted in white, black, yellow, or red. The floors were made out of simple packed clay with perhaps a mosaic pattern. Houses were built to face inwards toward a central courtyard, and each citizen was expected to connect his own home to the city's water supply. Hundreds of years before the great building projects of Rome, Pericles' Athenians developed and built a highly advanced sewage and water system. John Camp found what was left of it beneath these ruins.
Clean water is essential for the well-being of the city, of course, and both Pericles and other statesmen concerned themselves a lot with making sure the Athenians had enough. You see here a group of pipelines that have been excavated, many of them used to bring good fresh water into the city, many others used to carry the wastewater away. And literally hundreds of meters have been found crisscrossing the agora.
Sections were short, 3 to 4 feet long, because they were made on a potter's wheel. Around 2 inches thick, they were made with a special lip at one end to ensure a watertight fit. When a length of pipe had been laid, the engineers would test for leaks by pouring through water stained with ash. Traveling in shallow trenches beneath the agora, these pipes carried water from numerous wells and mountain springs. Pulling all these elements together, the temples, the houses, the marketplaces, the civic buildings, and this highly innovative sanitation system, it's plain to see that Athens was a model city. Under Pericles, it thrived. The challenge lay in maintaining this success. As Athens grew in wealth and power, it drew the jealousy of its neighbors. Pericles had to prepare for the day when the city would come under attack. The city of Athens undergoes a transformation. With their backing, Pericles leads his people for more than 3 decades.
Every year for over 30 years, he was re-elected head of the Board of Generals. Every year he was elected like that. He never, ever, ever failed to get that position.
As Athens booms, this military side of Pericles' authority becomes more and more vital. Tension mounts with Sparta, the only serious rival to the power that Athens holds in Greece. Pericles realizes that he needs to prepare his city for the possibility that war will come. Athens' existing defenses guard a large wedge of land, bounded by a pair of long walls and 2 miles of shore. It becomes clear that should Spartans attack, this is simply too great a line to defend. The Athenian forces would be overstretched and vulnerable. Though Athens is 5 miles inland, Pericles knows that the sea is where its power lies.